Hey there, artists. Welcome back to my channel where I deep dive into the heart of painting, creativity, and mastering your craft. Today I am tackling a topic that I know hits home for many of us, and that is the myth that being a perfectionist just means having good taste or high standards. Trust me, if you've ever found yourself stuck in the cycle of procrastination and perfectionism, unable to paint loosely or freely express yourself on canvas, this understanding of how to navigate perfectionism is a game changer. And when it comes to creating paintings that look professional or paintings that you're genuinely proud of, take it from my students. Perfectionism is your nemesis. My student Stefan recently had an exhibition of his paintings, and he realized he was feeling anxious about the event and not in a good way. After reflecting on this, he realized that he was carrying a lot of negativity around. And so he drew a caricature of this perfectionism that he was carrying with him. And he told that caricature that he wasn't invited to the exhibition. And the event was a huge success as a result. He sold 7 paintings at newly raised prices, and his first sale happened within 2 hours of the start of the opening. People at the event came up to him and told him the stories that they saw in his artwork, and he was stunned at just how much his own paintings evoked a response from other people. He realized that he could no longer hold on to this identity that he had as just an amateur hobby painter, and it was time to recognize that he's a pro. And maybe most importantly, his 2 kids saw all of this. And they got to see that art isn't just something you have to do for fun after you get done with your real job. If you're really interested in taking your paintings to the next level, I do work with artists inside of my program to help them paint the way they've always wanted to so they can have these kinds of breakthroughs. There's a link with more details below in the description that you can check out to find out more. Okay, back to perfectionism. First off, let's define our enemy here. The enemy is not painting, because if you aren't painting, nothing else happens. You aren't enjoying your craft, you aren't growing, and you aren't reaching your goals. And one of the biggest, boldest invitations I see to not paint is perfectionism. Because perfectionism screams, if you can't do it right, don't bother. I talked in a recent video about Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, which dives into how intentional play is a critical part of the creative process. But in this book, he also made a comment about procrastination that resonated so loudly to me. And I think it really hits home in this conversation about perfectionism. He says, many people associate procrastination with laziness. But psychologists find that procrastination is not a time management problem. It's an emotion management problem. When you procrastinate, you're not avoiding effort. You're avoiding the unpleasant feelings that the activity stirs up. Sooner or later, you realize that you're also avoiding getting where you want to go. Sound familiar? This narrative is the natural consequence of perfectionism. It's not about striving for excellence or pushing yourself to be your best. No, perfectionism is that voice in your head that constantly asks, what if this one doesn't turn out? Does that mean I just can't do it? What does it say about me if another painting falls short of my expectations or my taste? When we get stuck or experience doubts about our ability to see a painting through the quote right way, we give up, we walk away, or even worse, we don't try. It's a trap that's laid by fear that actually keeps us from making any real growth or progress in our work. So yes, having taste and loving incredible art and striving for something great is a good thing, but perfectionism isn't. So how do we tease apart enthusiasm and ambition from perfectionism? You see, the real key to getting better at painting isn't about having the fanciest brushes or the most expensive paint. It's not even about talent. It is about attitude, character, and most importantly, the willingness to show up and try and fail over and over. Because failure isn't the opposite of success. It is a stepping stone toward it. To illustrate what I mean, let's talk about how perfectionism and procrastination came up in this painting that you're watching me create. I knew that perfectionism and procrastination are 2 sides of the same coin, both rooted in an emotional inability to cope with discomfort. The discomfort of not being good enough, or potentially facing criticism. Trust me, this comes up a lot when you post most of your paintings on YouTube. But here's the thing. Every moment I would have spent overthinking and not painting would have been a moment I wasn't learning. This painting was a tough one because working on 2 horses in an environment pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was working from a very detailed photo reference that invited me to tighten way up. And I really, really didn't want to just create a painted replica of the photo reference. I just wasn't sure how to be loose, though, in this kind of composition. I know how to be loose in a portrait, whether it's a person or an animal, but when working with the entire body at a relatively small size and including a background and having all kinds of detail, well, that's just tough. So I took the time to really consider how to be intentional here. I started with a block-in that was as direct but painterly as I could muster. I took the time to tinker with my photo reference to test out different ways of loosening up. I took breaks in between sittings to really consider what the next best move would be. And I spent a lot of time looking at other paintings and actively researching how I could be loose in this particular piece. And the result was that I pushed through. And while there is still room for this to be more painterly or more expressive, I also had serious breakthroughs that already made this painting a significant step forward for me. The amount of impasto in the sky, or tackling a rough texture like the dirt of the field these horses are plowing, or evoking the complex yokes and harnesses the animals are wearing without getting too detailed. All of these were significant wins, and oftentimes we get so fixated on not making mistakes that we don't notice the ways in which we are solving problems in a painting more effectively than ever before. And if we don't notice ourselves solving them, it's really difficult to carry forward that momentum into the next painting. Instead, we often wind up spinning our wheels because we don't realize what worked so well on a previous painting and we don't think to carry it forward into the next one. Sometimes it is tough to recognize these breakthroughs on your own. I can't help but wonder how many of you are scared to reach out because you aren't used to getting help. If you would like my guidance in this process so that you can start making paintings that you're proud of and keep making those kinds of paintings over and over, I would love to hear from you. The truth is, mastering painting, especially painting loosely, is about letting go. It's about accepting where you are right now and trusting the process. And learning to enjoy that process too, failures and all. Every brushstroke doesn't need to be perfect. In fact, it's through those moments where we start to overwork the piece, but catch ourselves, that we find growth in learning and eventually our unique style. Oftentimes, the pain or the frustration of starting a painting and having it go really well, only to work it to death and looking at it with a bit of disgust afterward, gives us the motivation to unpack why exactly this painting didn't go according to plan and what precisely went wrong so that we know we will avoid it next time. That's what learning is. That's what mastery really comes down to. One of the most common pieces of feedback I give students who have the drawing skills and the value control and the color mixing and the comfort with oil paint overall, but are struggling to get the looseness they want, is that it comes down to iteration and enjoying the process more than anything else. You may get an amazing painting breakthrough every now and then, but to really solidify a painterly way of working, it's going to take repetition to lock in your process. Which means the best thing we can do is to find a way to enjoy our practice enough to show up over and over and start getting genuinely curious about both parts of the painting that are challenging, as well as the parts that unexpectedly go well or feel easier than they have in the past. So going forward, I'm going to remember just how much paint it took to get the impasto that I wanted from the sky. I'm going to remember that really expressing the horses' faces came down to adding little individual dollops of paint, and that I have room to experiment with that more next time. I'm going to recognize how well I could evoke the animal's legs with simple marks of shadow rather than crisp outlines that I painstakingly fill in. So if you're finding yourself stuck, reworking the same piece for hours or days or even weeks or months, ask yourself, are you actually striving for learning and growth? Or are you just afraid of what people might think if this one doesn't turn out? It's a tough question, but an essential one. Remember, your attitude and consistency in the long run matter way more than your effort and outcome on any one painting. You improve more from trying often and learning from each attempt than from making one perfect piece. It is about quantity over quality because quantity in the end leads to quality. So give yourself permission to make, quote, bad art and get curious when you realize you've messed up. Allow yourself to explore, to play, to make mistakes. That's where the real learning happens. That's where you'll find your breakthroughs and start painting more loosely, more expressively, without the weight of perfectionism holding you back. To sum up, perfectionism and procrastination are your enemies, not badges of honor, and especially not badges of taste. Attitude and effort trump any single great painting that you could make. And real growth comes from practice, mistakes, and even failure. Let go of the fear, embrace the process, and watch your art transform as you persevere in the long haul. I hope this discussion sparks some reflection and maybe even some liberation in your approach to painting. We're all on this journey together, learning and growing with every mark we lay down on the canvas. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button, share your thoughts with me in the comments, and don't forget to check out the link in the description to reach out to me to see if we might be a fit to work together to help you get unstuck for good and become proud of the work that you make time and time again in your studio. Until then, keep creating, keep exploring, and remember, the only way out is through. Happy painting.